Hi.
Morning.
Hello.
Hey, Sergey.
Hello.
Ted, that's good luck. I'm wearing my patriotic Zucchinis Across America shirt from 1988. We went to this like joke festival about zucchinis when I was a kid, where you had to like come with all of your summer zucchinis and just try to get rid of them as fast as possible. And I found this shirt in my parents' house and I've adopted it, but I thought it was appropriate for this like stressful election period. Let's see. Theoretically, have quorum. I guess we should wait a couple more minutes.
I hope you don't mind that I'm driving while
I can't hear you very well, but it's fine for you to, yeah, you should definitely drive while you're on the meeting. That's really safe.
same thing.
Now, what we really need to do is get them all riled up.
I think
really
we
can't hear you at all, Ted.
He may be
You're like-
connected to a headset or something that's on the seat. It sounds like the microphone's very far away.
Yes,
There, how's that?
much better.
That's better.
Thanks. Just sorry, I'm at the vet. I'm a little frazzled this morning. My cat
Oh.
needs some ibuprofen, so
Oh, sorry.
I just yeah.
Okay.
You
Well-
have a pickup truck, Ted? Is that the real American thing?
Sorry, the what?
The pickup truck. You have a pickup truck?
True. Yeah. I mean, I have a tiny
Fuck.
farm, and so I have a pickup truck full of dirt.
The real American.
Yeah, proper American. Ford Ranger. It's a tiny truck though. They don't make it. It was difficult to find a smaller, cheaper truck. Everyone's become obsessed with very expensive SUV trucks, status symbol things. I'm like, no, I need something I can dump a bunch of gravel into the back of and like not feel bad about it.
They make the Ranger again, but it's a lot more expensive than it used to be.
I know, it's crazy how it's like where are the tiny trucks? We used to have like a tiny Nissan growing up and it was the best.
No, I
But-
think they want everyone to buy big trucks, I guess.
I know it's hard to find them, but 2001 Ford Ranger, great truck. Yeah.
Okay, shall we start? We have a couple of agenda items today. And I think we waited for everyone.
Sorry, you all didn't see it. I have socks now, totally ready to start.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so the only topic for today is the one that I asked you to defer from last time. Should we start with that? I think Ted was the one that raised this issue, but there were comments from Liz as well in the email. And I would like one of you to start the conversation and mention what you think was wrong in that conversation and what do you think we should do to fix that problem?
So I think the concern
ahead,
that I
please.
had was that dev stats are being misused for marketing purposes. The primary reason why dev stats exists is to help the CNCF judge the health of the community. In particular, as we've seen with things like, the code, open source Codetober or whatever, right? Like where people started spamming repos with pull requests and so forth. I think that it's going to be really, really important for us to, use DevStats as a rough guide of, who are the most active contributors to OpenTelemetry. But I don't think that it's appropriate for individual companies to say, oh, we're the #1 contributor, the #2 contributor, right? Like, I feel like loose things like, hey, like we have contributed like roughly 1/3 of OpenTelemetry are fine. Things like, hey, like we, we're in the top 3 contributors. That's
Right.
fine. Just like, the we are #1 is going to generate like this hamster wheel of people spamming commits and bugs.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that, Liz.
You can
We
ask
also-
anyone who was involved in OpenStack what a obnoxious nightmare the way those things were abused. It led to a bunch of weird behavior as people started to try to game them and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's really
We
the,
actually-
the main reference there.
We actually reached out and asked Red Hat to stop using special interest group leadership as a metric in their marketing marketing ads, because in Kubernetes, their last ad about this was like, we lead 6 of the top 10, whatever special interest groups. We can help you fix your problems, as opposed, which implies a whole lot more than everybody who works in those groups can help you fix those problems.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I guess for like transparency, like we weren't aware of that blog post till it came out.
Yep.
But the thing is, like, that's actually we've been reining in marketing, even trying to do before and PR, and so we actually already have a meeting that's going to be sent out for today or tomorrow, just to be like, hey guys, remember, this is not business. Like, this
Not
is
the same.
not
Yep,
the same.
exactly.
We're
But-
trying to implement. It's definitely something.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I know that none of the folks on the GC would have approved this messaging, right? I just wanted to make sure that you have some ammunition when you go to your marketing department to say like, hey, I and the rest of the GC are concerned about this. Please stop.
So I totally agree with that, Liz, and especially the part about this is not a dig on Bogdan or Constance. I think of you as valuable allies in our request to address this issue, but I think it would be much easier for you two if OpenTelemetry had a sign on the wall that's like, some sort of like summary of like what we think is an appropriate way to market contributions or something like that. I don't know how you all feel, but then
Yeah, this is the
also
thing
we would all be kind of bound
where,
by
like,
the same
we
guidelines.
filed a bug, right? Like we filed a bug against the DevStats repo, asking them like, please hide these statistics, don't make them like, super prominently advertised. And they refused, right? Because they were like, hey, this is useful for gauging community health, which I understand, right? So now instead we need to go this path of creating marketing guidelines, which, I was hoping we wouldn't have to do it, but like, here we are. I guess we're going to have to do it at some point.
So-
I think, Liz, though, that's a good idea because, clear guidance at a project level in terms of which is in line with our community and code of conduct, and it is really part of the code of conduct of how people participate on the project and genuinely contribute. So I do think it's good to have clear guidelines.
So let me point 2 things. First, I think having clear guidelines is good. I think removing these stats from DevStats is not necessarily a good thing for 2 reasons. One, they are open, so everyone can go and scrape GitHub and build these dashboards by themselves. So you don't have to rely on DevStats to have this. GitHub actually has insights already, like on the GitHub pages, you can see this. So it's very hard to hide the stats. As long as they exist and they are public, somebody will come and build their own dashboard and will prove this thing. So I think the approach should be much better on our side to have a specific marketing section of how to market these things.
The other thing we can do is we can take it from, this is what we're asking for in open telemetry. We can socialize it with some of the other projects who have had trouble, like Kubernetes and others, and say, do you agree with this? And then we can bring it up to the CNCF and say, would the CNCF be willing to adopt this for CNCF projects? Because I would love to see VCs funding open source projects that have gotten into the CNCF. Based on that, as a presumption of a winner, I'd like that to stop too. Like that seems like a bad thing, but I don't know quite how to fix that. Let's focus on the marketing one. But I think asking the CNCF if they would work with us to make global standards, for lack of a better word, would also be helpful. But I think we need to make ours first and see if it meshes.
I mean, I think it's, Sarah, it's a good idea to have an ad hoc standard that we, propose for our project, and then that gets adopted. Yep.
Yep, agreed, 100%.
That's for sure good.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I remember Microsoft was claiming leadership in open source all the time, but I couldn't find any article. So it seems that anytime it's claimed, it's some third party doing that. So I don't know whether Microsoft ever done it, or it maybe TechCrunch always did it. So yeah, if you want, I mean, there always will be workarounds around this situation. So like some third party may publish articles saying like Splunk is like, or like Microsoft or whatever, like top contributor of the day is a top contributor, and that may be problematic. So our code of conduct will apply to contributors, but we cannot control third party.
Right. No, but you can actually ask your PR teams to go out and then curb the article. Or we as project leadership could say, send a note to them or post something about it saying, we really discourage this kind of thing.
Yeah, especially given a lot of those come out of PR departments. Having some written down guidelines will make that a lot easier, right? Just so everyone can hand this out to their PR department, say like, hey, these are the guidelines when you're creating these third-party articles.
Yeah, I'm actually doing PR training about, I'm giving PR training about open source to the PR teams here shortly. So I'll let you all know what that looks like.
I have a question related to this. Do these rules apply for individuals tweeting?
Bogdan, what do you mean by that?
I mean, a bunch of people have their Twitter accounts saying that they are not coupled with their employee and whatever, and their opinions are there. Do they apply to them as well, or we say that, oh no, because they don't represent Splunk or other company, they can do whatever they want, they are third party or whatever we call them?
I mean, I think we can add it to the community guidelines, right? Where you can say like, part of the community guidelines is please respect, these are our wishes about how community members talk about this project in public. So that would be one option.
So you think it should apply to individuals posting tweets?
Well, sure, yeah. I don't want it to be like me as an individual with my individual marketing account, as head of product or PR somewhere, saying just for myself, here's these things. Yeah, that would be great.
The question though is that if they're part of the community, then those guidelines apply, right? I mean, if there's some third party who is doing this, then we can certainly reach out and ask them not to.
But yes, Bogdan, if you posted on your Twitter account, which has, I know gazillions of followers, I'm the #1 contributor to open telemetry, and Splunk is riding on my heels kind of thing or whatever, then I think we would go to you and go, dude, really? Not that you would, but as community member, we would ask you and we would hold you accountable as peers for behaving in a manner that, hey, stop that, in a manner that did not meet our preferences, but it is you who's doing it, not the company. I think we can hold the company accountable more directly.
Okay. The other thing is we had a huge campaign, by the way, and I think the DevStats started from us doing this huge campaign of being #2 project in CNCF. And should we remove that whole campaign? Should we just, because
No, I think right, like the bit about the community as a whole being healthy, right? I
Yeah.
think that's a very different message than, you know, company X or company Y is the #1 contributor, right? Like, you know, to talk about the, you know, but in addition to talking about raw number of contributions that were second to Kubernetes, like only Kubernetes, we should say, like, you know, we have 100-something companies contributing, right? Like, I think that's the more meaningful statistic to me.
but that's
Yeah.
still a dev stat.
And it's
So-
still a dev stats thing, right? Like, I don't object to dev stats. What I object to dev stats for is like when people kind of use it to kind of spam commits, right? Like, or right, like dev stats is a tool for the CNCF to measure the health of the community. It is appropriate for us to talk about the health of our community in terms of dev stats.
So are you just accusing Splunk that they spam commits?
No.
By hearing, no? Okay.
I think Liz's concern is that if companies all feel like it's a race to get the most commits, they're going to start doing that. Not that anyone's been doing that.
Yes,
yet, 'cause
exactly.
at
That
least
someone
I've
else
seen
will
no-
then
Yeah.
come and say, I want to
This
take the
is
#1
all
from
preemptive.
Splunk.
Yep, exactly.
I wanna
Yeah, I
emphasize
do also
as well,
think so. I
feel
think the
like
dev
this is all
stats.
preemptive.
I think the dev stats are really valuable. Like I use them internally a lot at Google to show the health of the community and to show why we should continue investing in this project and how we get more bang for our buck now than we did with Open Census. Similarly, I do think the dev stats are valuable in certain situations. Like I know there's been now some marketing by AppDynamics about their commitment to OpenTelemetry. As far as I know, AppDynamics has zero involvement in OpenTelemetry at all. I think it is useful that the dev stats reflect that. So that firms that claim that they're making massive contributions, it can be seen that that is not actually accurate.
Yep, I agree.
It's a very slippery slope, I
Yeah.
would say, for when this can be used and when cannot be
Yes.
used. And I think, anyway, I'm not
I
saying
might suggest that I don't think in this call we're going to resolve exactly what the guidelines should be, but I think we do need to do that. So I would suggest that maybe we find some group of individuals from this call and hopefully from the rest of the community that could like take some kind of rough deadline to draft like some actual guidelines. There's also some interesting questions about whom they apply to, whether even if it is corporations and not people, like, you know, we as a GC are representing ourselves, not our employers. And so there's a lot of complexity, I think, in like who actually has to abide by these rules and what are the consequences and stuff like that. So there's a lot to figure out. I think we should figure out like now, like who from this group is actually responsible for coming up with these guidelines and what their rough timeline is. And I'm positive the discussion will take more than the 12 minutes we have, so.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
action item would be just to, Ben, start a thread on the community repo to build these guidelines as a community. And then I'm sure we can get rough consensus to have a basic set in place.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a core ask here from me, which is, it's true, there may be like outsiders who come around and try to pull some stuff or something like that, but we're talking about like the tent poles of this community, right? Like the people and the companies who are at the core of lifting this project up and making it real. Like we have to be the ones setting the best example for everyone else. And that's just an important part, I think, of making this work in the long run. And I've got the vets calling me on the other line, so I have to drop. But this is a great discussion. I'm happy to follow up, and I'll follow up also with the CNCF and certification trademarks and compliance programs and how they could help with this as well.
Thanks,
Okay,
Ted.
see you all.
Hi, thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Bye.
So I had one further item, if we're done with this for the moment, are
Well,
we?
who's gonna create the issue on the community repo? I mean,
I can do that. Do you want me to, Ben?
Thank you, Ali.
yeah, I just want to make sure it happens. That's all. That sounds
Sure,
good.
sure. Yeah, I'll take an action item.
Okay, thank you.
Who's gonna start writing the document?
Well, I think that I'll
If
leave
we
this-
start from, start from a discussion. Alita, just for grins, can you also tag me in it so I can
Yes,
find it?
Yes, of
Because
course.
I
I
hate
know.
GitHub.
Yep, exactly. I will do.
Thank you. So are we good to move on to the next question, which I had thrown into email, which it isn't on the agenda at the moment, but, and I don't think it's a long conversation. I just wanted to, I got reached, Alolita, I got reached out to by Mark Atwood from AWS as well. And he just said, hey, have there been any rumblings in the OpenTelemetry community about our release of a distribution? And so I wanted us to take a moment with Alolita here to see if there was any feedback in that for us, because this was the first distribution we've seen come out.
Not, right? Because
It is not?
distribution. It was kind of like viewed as a distribution of September.
That's accurate, although I think that Amazon market cap difference with Lightstep made it a much more interesting thing to the world. I think it was the first one to get a lot of outside attention, which I totally appreciate actually. But that's this question stands. I mean, it definitely got a lot of attention.
Right.
So I think there are good reasons to have your own distribution as long as you don't fork the code and read all the work. So I can tell you a couple of reasons why we did it for good or bad. So we want to have to offer our customers specific support timelines and stuff. And there may be sometimes where we cannot push a fix upstream as soon as the contract says to us. So we may have to maybe even fork for a small period of time the code, parts of the code, and do the fix for our customers. So what we want to achieve there is mostly to be the customer support things. So in that regard, what we did was actually we did not fork anything. We just create our own main function for the collector, put all the things from upstream into one place. With that in mind, that if there is a bug in any of these components and we cannot push a fix upstream, we will fork immediately the component, fix that, and then push upstream and then remove the fork. Anyway, this was our reasoning for doing a distribution. And I would like to hear maybe the problems for AWS.
Or if there were any. I haven't heard any real grumbles.
I mean, we haven't, again, I can just give you an update on the AWS distro. So far, we have not heard anything negative. Our objective really was to re-amplify that open telemetry as a project is the core. And what we are doing is providing support around the integrations, which are going to always go into the project upstream. So we have not heard any negatives.
Yeah, similarly, I've no issue of vendors creating their own distributions as long as they're not forks that add special privilege like vendor-only functionality or modify the APIs. The AWS one seems a-okay.
Yeah, and then this ties right back to the conformance thing that Ted's starting. So that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah, and like for Google, we're actually not likely doing our own distributions. We're actually going to aggressively try and do open source first if we can. See how long we can get away with doing that.
You actually have your own distribution internally.
Yes, but it's not one that we have a bundled version of the collector, but it's one that we're only embedding in our own compute environments. It's not one we're going to be actively sending customers to. So our documentation is going to tell customers like, oh, if you want to set up OpenTelemetry yourself, go download the open source components. If you're running in Kubernetes on Google Cloud, the collector's already there. Like you don't have to do anything, it's just there. And so the version, our distribution is the one that's just there. It's not one we expect customers to deploy on their own.
That being said, right, like, under the Apache license, you are entitled to not release the source code for whatever variant.
Oh yeah, we're going to release it anyways.
But you're going to release it anyways, right? Like just
to
express the intent. The intent is you want to share with the community, but it's primarily so that we can see what you're doing, not for people.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't expect our customers to be downloading that source or compiling it or downloading artifacts from it. It's the distribution that we're just embedding in certain compute environments. But again, our documentation is going to tell people, like if they're like, oh, I'm running my own VM and want to use the OpenTelemetry collector, we're going to say like, okay, go download the core open source version.
Yeah, first of all, I was really happy to see the Amazon announcement. Just if nothing else, I mean, it's sort of obvious people on the inside of the project, given the amount of work that Amazon is putting into OpenTelemetry. But with open tracing and open census, there is always some question around what was going to happen with Amazon, because X-Ray had its own, you know, I mean, they were open,
Yeah.
but they were Amazon specific standards, and so on and so forth. And it's just like, even 6 months ago, it wasn't clear how things were going to shake out. And it's just great to be like, yes, this is actually going to, like, all the major cloud providers have bought into this. It's great, right? I've got no issue with the announcement per se, but I do think like the project in general is so muddy right now as to what the scope of the project is. And I don't know what the announcement could necessarily have done to clarify that while still being like concise, but it's open telemetry isn't like a single thing. And with the amount of scope, especially including both the SDKs and the APIs and the collectors, and even more so for an organization like Amazon, where you're not just a vendor, you're a platform and a vendor. And so it's like, I'm worried that we're gonna like glom everything together, which is a natural thing for someone not familiar with open telemetry. And people, one of the goals in my mind for the project is to be modular. And I'm a little bit concerned if distributions are the way that people consume it, that it's going to become a pretty heavy dependency. Like if you take open telemetry, you're actually like, if you use the distribution for convenience, you're actually bringing in like a huge amount of functionality that you kind of get tightly coupled, which could become an issue for some of the initial design goals of the project around being lightweight. So I've got no issue with the distribution. It's more of an issue for like the mission vision stuff that we're doing to really clarify our stance on being modular. I think if the project gets too heavy, it's going to be harder to embed in certain scenarios. So no issue with the announcement, but the distributions in general, even though Lightsap's obviously doing it too, right? But it's just like, it does make me a little nervous around the modularity goal for the project.
I mean, the thing is, Ben, that you bring up a very good point, right? Because even in the collector world specifically, right now, it would, and we are kind of, you know, seeing the evolution of the project also, where there will be a lot more exporters that will get added in. There will be a lot more receivers that will get added in, and at that point, you know, performance or footprint or all these, you know, aspects will become equally important to the project as they are to the distributions downstream. And we do need to figure out, you know, what the scope of the project is and how can we leverage all these distributions downstream to actually do the heavy lifting for scaling, for example, where you know, it's a win-win.
Alolita, I'm not against what you did, and probably gave you the flexibility to move a bit faster than the community for the moment. And I trust that you will come back and push all these things upstream, and you will not have internal changes.
Yep,
And
yep, totally.
that should be the goal and stuff. I do think that we should talk a bit with Kubernetes community about this. They have a large experience, and Kubernetes is mostly used via distributions, GKE, you name it. All the vendors or all the things are providing distributions of the Kubernetes. And I think we should talk a bit with them and see how did they manage to do this, and what is the story behind that. And maybe we learn from that. Maybe we don't repeat some of the mistakes. Maybe we do a better job. But I think it will be a huge thing for us to talk with them and hear about that.
Agreed, totally.
So Bogdan, TED is reaching out to the CNCF to talk about how they do conformance programs. I worked with William Dennis, and I bet Morgan can actually pull William Dennis in, if he's still at Google, to talk to us about.
Yeah.
He
so
did most
Josh
of that
Sareth
work.
is in contact with him. Josh Sareth is our new TL for the team at Google. He comes from the Scala community as well, where they've had to do this. He's already they're all in contact with TED already.
Awesome, yeah. And if we get Ted and William to potentially, and whomever Ted brings in from the CNCF to come talk to us about pros and cons, I think we can make decisions pretty clearly from that, and then figure out what the work is. I mostly wanted to make sure that nobody, you know, like with no rules, have these different distributions not been okay so far? And I think the answer is yes. We just need to figure it out longer going forward, or bigger going forward.
Yes, absolutely. And just to add to that, again, conformance and testing and certification obviously is a big thing for distributions. And we have been looking at, how to have a general purpose set of guidelines as well as test harnesses, which we can then contribute back to the project, right? So again, I do see that much of the heavy lifting that we're doing comes back completely to the project.
Brilliant.
Thank you so
Cool.
much. And I think we literally need to hear this ASAP, if possible, because there may be technical things that we need to change to facilitate a better model for this. So right now we do build, for example, I think the most distributions will be on two things. Will be a lot of distributions on the collector and a lot of what Lightstep calls starters on the SDKs, which mostly will be some embedded configuration that is different than the default configuration that OpenTelemetry produces or distributes. So I think these are the two major parts where we have to talk, and we need to make sure we structure the project in a way to facilitate this somehow, and to not make people forking the code, just embedding it into a different configuration or giving it a different view.
Yep. Makes sense.
I gotta run, folks.
Yeah, I think most of us have to go.
Yeah.
Bye.
Talk later.
Catch
Thank
you later.
Bye.